Now, would you be able to put that email up? Yeah. Uh, I'm having trouble with my computer, and so I'm having a hard time writing anything because I just haven't did this hunt and peck, and it's just so anyway. I wish I had done better in kind of like laying this out. But anyway, how about Goer up for reading?
Sure, Jeff. Let's see. Dear folks of Baba, in this country and throughout the world, we prize self-sufficiency and confidence as two of the highest virtues in this life. But they are not always accompanied by the humility that opens us up to the universal love necessary for the spiritual life. One of Mehera's favorite quotes of Baba was, "Seeds germinate in soft soil. I plant my seed of love not in your strengths, but your weaknesses." Being vulnerable is often considered a weakness, and we usually avoid it. To admit that we are wrong, to express that we are often afraid and lack confidence and apologize to another for our unkindness, to admit that we often feel inadequate, that we have been hurt by someone. These are behaviors we often try to avoid. But as Rumi, the great Sufi mystic, said centuries ago, the light comes in through the wound. And Mani, who spent almost her entire life beside her brother, Baba, used to quote the line, I prayed to you for strength to carry out your work. You gave me weakness, so I would depend on you. What has been your experience of vulnerability in your life? Do you trust Baba enough to go out on a limb sometimes, to take risks even though it makes you look inadequate, to venture out into the uncomfortable waters in a flimsy boat? Are you inclined to play it safe rather than taking chances in life? I'm sure we all have sometimes experienced being too open and vulnerable to others and become an object of sarcasm and abuse, especially when opening up to someone who didn't have our best interests in mind. On the other hand, have you experienced, oops, sorry, um, I lost it. Yeah. Um, I'll start from here again. Are you inclined to play it safe rather than taking chances in life? I'm sure we all have sometimes experienced being too open and vulnerable to others and become an object of sarcasm and abuse, especially when opening up to someone who didn't have our best interests in mind. On the other hand, have you experienced that in being too self-protective, you have withheld from others some of the more loving parts of yourself? In the various situations in life, how do you determine how far is safe to place your heart out before others? Have you found that trusting Baba, sorry, have you found that trusting Baba and going out on a limb with others sometimes rewards you with the surprising joy of give and take of love? Are there times when you could have apologized for hurting someone's heart, but were reluctant because it would make you seem weak? Can you share an example of an uncomfortable risk you took that proved to be invaluable in your life? Have you hesitated to give certain things over to Baba for fear of the outcome? Say, for example, your attachment to a romantic situation that might be a bit rocky and you don't want to lose that person, or turning to Baba when you're about to tell your boss how you honestly feel when it might jeopardize your job. Does going does giving things to Baba, trusting him and letting go of results get any easier the longer you're with him, or does it get more complicated? That's it. I apologize for sending this email out. My computer is still being repaired and I'm having a devil of a time figuring out how to send out communications. Without my computer, I realize I'm a bit lost and vulnerable, knowing that emails are piling up with no way to answer them. In his love and help from dear friends, Jeff. Sorry, folks, my eyes are not what they used to be, and the print was rather small, so I was trying to.
Yeah. Right.
So Jeff,
Yeah.
I just read that paragraph from
Yeah.
Darwin Shaw that said, guilt is something to give away too. So any guilt you have about any sort of inadequacy of communication, I think we're all grown-ups here, and we encourage you to release that guilt.
Okay. I release that guilt and flood all of you people. Um, so one thing that, yeah, I had hoped to kind of get this a little bit more clarified. And but later on, we have somebody who's going to come and share her story of coming to Baba, and that might happen around what
We hope. We hope.
10:30. We'll go forward with this,
Yes.
but I wanted to. This is kind of such a large subject, and I was going to narrow it down a little bit as a possibility. And I guess I should say as Baba, as you know, Baba encourages us to be wholehearted in our lives, which is something beautiful when we feel Baba's love within ourselves. But when we try to express this love in the world around us with others, it can be a different matter, and it can be very beautiful when the world around us is receptive. But I have been asked over the years, working here, many people have asked me, how can we keep our heart open and loving, when Baba's love in us is rejected by others or criticized? We can be very vulnerable in being hurt and taken advantage of. That is we can remain open heart. Can we? How can we remain open-hearted in the face of others' hurtful reactions? And the mandala I felt were helpful in this. As I experienced them, they remained always inwardly open and loving, and yet outwardly they might express a little distance. They might withhold their embrace from worldly people who are in the habit of being hurtful and sarcastic. In other words, they would protect their heart when necessary at the outer level, so that they would remain open inwardly at an inner level. I don't know if that makes sense, but they would protect their heart when necessary at an outer level, so that they could remain open, continue to be open at an inner level. And I remember Darwin, sometimes someone would ask Darwin about Baba, and sometimes, just out of curiosity, and I noticed that Darwin would just talk about Baba generally. He wouldn't kind of share his intimate experience of Baba as he would with people that he was close to, or people who were devoted to Baba. So he just knew enough not to put his intimate experience out in front of someone who wouldn't really receive it or appreciate it. So, I know it's different for everyone, but where is the line between being too self-protective, thereby losing intimacy with others, and too vulnerable and being unnecessarily hurt by others? So these are some questions to put out there. But so, does anybody want to venture in on this subject? I mean, it's not an easy subject. It's even kind of a little bit vulnerable to respond to this. Anybody want to be a little vulnerable and go out there? I know Tony is always very good at sharing, but I don't. Oh, good. Hey, we've got
Tony, you have a reprieve. We'll go to down under for a few minutes.
Yeah.
Go for it, Josh.
Yeah, it's interesting. I feel like, this is just my saying, I feel like this is a skill rather than maybe like some kind of spiritual, I don't know, magical thing. I feel like it's just, almost like learning to, floss or do something like do your taxes or something. I feel like it's a skill. I mean, I don't know. I'm open to hearing other people's stuff, but I just, when I'm around someone, I'm sort of vulnerable at a surface level, so I don't tell them my passwords to my bank account. I don't, I might share things, on a surface level, and I wait until I sort of let them show me what they're like, and some people, I can feel my heart go like this, oh, and just like, I don't know, like curl up and like shield itself like a snail in a shell, when I'll see someone, if someone's like, if they're, like super mean to someone else or things like that, I think, yeah, I just watch to see how they behave, and and then if they're nice and loving, I feel like, again, it's kindness and love are big, then I'll open up more and more and more. It's the thing is, I do have the belief that each and every person has potentiality for both great kindness and great cruelty. So I don't underestimate other people's capacity to either be loving or hurtful. And I think that that's something that I try and hold. But yeah, I think it's a skill, and I want to hear what other people have to say about it in their life.
Yeah. Yeah, like you're kind of saying, it's not like some transcendent state. It's just being able to read clearly the person before you, so you don't just put your heart all the way out there and then get your head chopped off.
Yeah.
But not so far back that you come off as being impersonal and reserved and indifferent or disinterested.
Yeah, exactly. That's mine.
Yeah, excellent.
Tony, what a nice surprise. I see you raised your hand.
I made him raise his hand.
He did. I was sitting here just dwelling on the one thing that's been on my mind the last couple of days, and whether I really wanted to talk about it. And when I was suddenly put on the spot, I guess Baba wants me to talk about it. It goes. I'm a very smart guy. I mean, I have a very good intelligence, and I have since I was little, and it made me different from other people in some ways. And I was, really kind of try to like not make it so obvious. But the other thing is, my intuition, my insights, heart insights, which often I feel like Baba is whispering in my ear, can sound really outlandish. Certain past life memories, I think I have certain sense of past lives of famous people. Like it struck me immediately that Obama had been Abraham Lincoln. I can't prove it to anyone, but he came back, and he's black, and he's continuing the work that was left with the Civil War. So that's in my nature to think in those terms, and also to have a certain double checking on an intelligence level of it. So after Harry Kenmore died, I enjoyed being around him. He was like pouring wisdom from a golden goblet. But after he died, the group became very different. We were hanging around because, well, anyway, somebody said that there was a thing going around the Baba world that Otis Redding, who had died in a plane crash, that Baba had given him God realization at the time of the crash. And the guys there were mocking this whole thing. And I am a very intelligent man. And I knew even as a kid, there are no stupid questions or stupid ideas. I said, Baba is Baba. I don't know what the story is, but Baba is Baba. If Baba wanted to give him God realization, he could give him God realization. And I said, and you know, Dock of the Bay, the lyric certainly reads like someone on the sixth plane facing that big expanse that has to be crossed, you know. Oh man, I got mocked so mercilessly for that. And for other things that would just come out of my nature, the kind of things I've described. And so I shut it down. I shut it down. But in the process, see, I was listening to Baba within me, like whispering in my ear, kind of. That's the best way I could describe it. So in shutting that down, I was shutting down that connection, that internal connection that I was trusting what Baba whispered in my ear. And it made it possible. This was the awareness I had this week. It made it possible for the psychopath who took over that group to manipulate peer pressure, to disconnect me from Baba at a very, from Baba in, is there a dog there? From Baba in me. And it's taken a long time for me. Now, of course, I got out of that group. We have 10 years later, it's a big story. And I resumed that inner connection full force. But I am mindful if I feel someone is, someone's comments are leading me to not trust my innermost being, and they're persistent in it, I cut them off. I just cut them off. I won't have people in my life who are, because there's a certain, to be vulnerable, well, we're all vulnerable, but to be vulnerable in this sense is you are opening yourself up to reveal what comes from vulnerability, but also to attack. And I don't want to ever again shut down that vulnerability to just be myself. So the inner being is reflected in the out. But I'm mindful, like on Facebook, I will block people who are troublemakers and who get people stirred up about some meaningless concept instead of focusing on Baba with their hearts. So I've learned that you got to protect your innermost being so that you can be vulnerable and remain vulnerable and not ingest the negativity and turn on yourself. So that's what was on my mind.
Beautiful. Great example. Yeah. To remain open, so that you don't shut down. But that has happened to certain people, Baba people. They were a little too open and expressive around people that were kind of shut them down, hurt them, and they wound up shutting down for periods of time. And that's an unfortunate thing, and we have to kind of monitor that on ourselves, that we're not out there too far to the extent that we can be hurt. Yeah, excellent example.
Thank you.
Ron, you had your hand up?
Yes. I have an personal anecdote, and I'll let you all decide if it fits in exactly with this theme, or maybe just tangentially with the theme. So this goes back to when I was working. I started working in a shoe store in Oakland, California, where I was living, and I had sold shoes in stores for a number of years. My father actually had a store, and I worked for him since I was 13. And so I've been doing it for 15 years. I was quite experienced at it, much more experienced than all the other people that were actually selling shoes there. But I was the new person. And so I got onto the sales floor, and it was a commission sales job. And so people would take turns getting the customer and see if he could make a sale. And every once in a while, there would be some kind of a thing like, that was my turn, or this was my. And so what happened one day, on a busy day, I got into a conflict with probably the youngest guy on the sales floor, who I considered a really nice kid. He was quite a bit younger than me, but I apparently, in his mind, I had done something that was wrong, and he got really angry, and he got so angry. But I didn't think I was in the wrong. He didn't explain it to me such that I felt I was wrong. So I didn't apologize or anything. As it didn't seem to be my style to do that. Now, it just so happened that I was reading a book by Inayat Khan at the time. I mean, it couldn't have been more perfect timing. It was on the subject of loving your enemy, or how to deal with an enemy, which I had just created in this conflict. I now had a full-fledged enemy that was working with me at this store. And the way it expressed itself was this young guy would criticize me in front of, if anybody else was there working with us, he would criticize me on anything he could possibly think of that I had ever done wrong, or or that I was doing wrong, or that anything like that. And he never would talk to me. So he was giving me the silent treatment and criticizing me. But because of what Inayat Khan was recommending, it was to take whatever the person says, and if it's true, if his criticism had merit, then just do better. And so that's the way I decided to play this thing, because I didn't feel like it was going to be the right thing to just say, hey, look, I was probably wrong, and it might have been fine for some people, but I didn't go that route. I just stuck with allowing him to harass me for, it might have been like 2 weeks of occasionally working with him. He was a student in college. And so here's what happened. After all this, I walk in one day, or I guess I was there first, and then he walks in, and I was just geared up for the usual, but instead he approaches me as if this other thing had never happened. It was like it never happened. And he was just as friendly as to me as he was when I first met him. When I first met him, he was a very friendly guy. And he just took off with that. And it was like that other thing had never occurred. And then about a week later, he was moved to a different store, and I never saw him again. But I have found that this is sort of the way Baba can work. And I believe I would have to say that, I was going to put up with this guy's thing, and Baba just decided to have a little minor miracle to, which I find that must have been like a miracle, that he just immediately forgot everything about not liking me. So I don't know if people that fits in with the subject.
Well, you took it in the right way, kind of took a vulnerable situation and actually came through in a positive way in dealing with it, I would say. Yeah.
The results were positive, but I didn't really have anything to do with it. I was shocked.
Good. Beautiful. Okay. Looks like Tina.
Yeah, well, I don't have any problem apologizing because I think everything is my fault. I really do.
Yeah.
And maybe that's, maybe I should get into blaming people more.
Or blaming Bob, I guess. Let's see. Yeah. Oh, wait. Stop on that again. That not blaming yourself, but
Yeah, maybe I should get into blaming others more.
I don't know if that would necessarily work. Um, let me see. Yeah. Well, maybe someone will touch on that as we go along.
Okay.
It's a very interesting statement to make.
Richard.
Well, what um, I'm trying to form how to communicate. It's kind of based on what Tony was talking about, but my experience is that I'm not really an ordinary guy. And on the surface, I can pretend to be ordinary. I can kind of do the ordinary. And I've been forced to work in very ordinary circumstances along with other people. But when it comes to the inner awareness of the self, of who you are, who we each are, I have found that people don't perceive that. Most people I meet, even if I'm very, very, very cluttered in my own thinking, communicating to, there's some people that will befriend me and they have a natural affinity with me and I treat them like friends. But what I think it is, to be honest, is Baba makes you aware, obviously, of himself within you. That is your innermost self. That's your real self. So once you move past some of the ego stuff, then how do you relate to others out in the world? And I found that for me, it's pretty limited. I have to go with whatever channel or affinity I have with someone, and I can't go much further. I've told people who I know here who are friendly to me, a few neighbors and whatnot, and I generally get quite a bit of respect and goodwill, which I enjoy. But to go too much further into who am I, what are my perceptions, what are my intuitions, but I want to put it in a slightly different way. I want to frame it this way because I don't know how else to put it. I can see people in a way that it's more of what I would expect Baba to allow me to see. Once you get on, we'll call it the spiritual path. Once you get on that spiritual path, the only thing I can really do productively with other people is try to think about Baba and then try to envision them, while I'm thinking about Baba. And I can make it more specific and concrete. I have two neighbors across the way that are magnificent people. And they were good Catholics from early ages and all that stuff. And they got married and they're very, very responsible and they're middle class and now they're retired and they have good income, but they did everything with a work ethic, a very, very clear relationship, a friendship between them. They had 2 kids, blah, 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 blah. So they've really accomplished quite a bit with their lives, but I have tried to approach them about Baba and they're not ready for that. They're really not ready for that. So there is love between us. And I tell his wife, Lou's wife, Catherine, say, look, Catherine, I love you. She's a fabulous woman. I really think the highest of her. And she kind of gets it. But I think where that really comes from is there's a real affinity, a real deep connection between us. But the only place where that can ever go is this connection with Baba. But they're not, they have done everything they think they can in life. So they're not going there right now. And I think there's a lot of people in the world like that. In this new book with Dr. Kenmore, some of the reprints of the Tony, The Way and the Goal, near the end of that book, in one or two of his speeches, because I know Tony and I had to be sitting there hearing this stuff, but together. But one of his speeches, he really talks about the world is your foe, Maya is your enemy, and the only thing you have in your arsenal is Baba. You've got nothing else. That's all you've got. So walking out into the world and encountering people of all kinds of different sanskaric backgrounds and experiences, I don't think it's that easy. I don't. But I try to greet most of it with a sense of humor and a smile, because I remember somewhere along the line, Baba said, no depression, no sadness. Don't give him the sour face, give the world the smile. The world's got enough trouble. Anyway.
Yeah. Thank you. Excellent.
From Texas, let's hear from Ralph.
That's the lone hand state up there.
Yeah, that's a good story, Richard. I also liked the story about working in the shoe store. That was a great story. The the fellow, the younger sales guy, I guess, because who told that story?
Ron.
Ron, thanks. Because you were so naturally good at it. He was probably envious and probably felt threatened in his livelihood as well, you know, and felt that he needed to assert the fact that he still had a place there. So he took it out on you, I presume. And that you didn't have much response, I was able to identify with that because I found that if you attack someone, it usually just ends up in chaos. Or if you if I defend myself, but if it's possible to remain silent and try to understand and let it continue, chances are the 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 person who has spoken out didn't know why they were speaking out. And no doubt, then, like you said, Ron, I've had that experience also, that situation may just drag out with a certain degree of discomfort for quite a while or a short while, whatever time dictates, and this, or whatever the force dictates. And then all of a sudden you said the guy was really nice. And I think he probably came to a certain kind of awareness of that he found acceptable.
Ralph, what
Yeah.
I imagined from what happened is I treated him like a friend, even though he was treating me like an enemy, and it drove him crazy, such that he decided to do something crazy, like become my friend. He couldn't do anything else. If I was going to treat him like a friend, he wouldn't be my enemy. So that's why Baba and all the great ones said, "Love your enemy." If you hate your enemy, then you become your enemy. So it never works out well.
Then that's probably a little different than my assessment, my take on it. I didn't hear your story that well, I think. So in general, Baba mentions it. It's in the discourses. Right adjustment to the art of right adjustment to others is a big part of living. We need to do it. We need to take it on. And he also mentions poise. I mean, we need to become comfortable to take it on and try to find a way we work and that we feel good with it.
Yeah,
Poise.
if the shoe fits, wear it. Yeah.
Yeah. So then, and Erich in Mandalay Hall, I mean, maybe a couple of times I'll recall, he'd sit down to tell stories, and there might be 6 or there might be 100 people in the room. And on at least one occasion, he looked around and he stretched his neck, and looked up over his glasses and under his glasses and through his glasses and took in every face in the room. And then he said, "Do you know what I'm doing? I'm looking to see who's here. And because your audience should play a role in how you're going to present yourself and what you're going to say." And I thought, you know, that has to be a consideration of every great artist, a performer. And Tony being a performer, we know that he's got that incorporated into himself, his presentation. So then again, Erich. So that I thought when Erich said that, you know, I thought what he should say, because if there are a lot in the room, you know, you want it to be, try to make it for everyone. And so on a trip to the Ellora Caves and Aurangabad, you know, and the tomb of Zarzari Box, and we stopped off at Sakori, I think, maybe Shirdi too. And there was a fort of Shivaji. It may have been Aurangzeb's fort, but I think Shivaji captured it. It was a famous fort. It was a big fort. And we all got out of the bus and everyone was stretching. Some went for the toilet. And there was wooded area around the fort. And Erich stood there, and Jack Caraco was standing there, and he said, you know, here, see this place, look out across there. We looked, there was a vast, it was just landscape of Indian, the face of Indian countryside. And he says, there's an echo here. Now you can shout. He said, now Jacko, cup your hands and shout as loud as you can. And so Jacko did that. And sure enough, it came back, a real fine echo, replicate of Jacko's shout. He says, Ralph, he said, that was a good one, Jacko. He says, now, Ralph, you do it. So I did it. And there was the echo. And Eric just looked at the both of us and shook his head side to side like hopeless case. And I thought, what does he mean by that? Why was Jacko's so good and mine no good? I didn't get it, but it stuck with me. And I thought, we have to learn to listen to ourselves as well. Go ahead. So I'll let it go.
Yeah.
That you said something to me. Yeah, Jay Bob.
Janet?
Can I jump in for just a second to ask Ralph a question? I've seen on the news that the heat wave in Texas, that it's something, they said it was something like the hottest or second hottest place on earth right now. And I'm just wondering, Ralph, how you're doing?
Doing well. We've had about 3 or 4 very pleasant days in the 80s and prolific rain. Yesterday and the day before. Very, very good. Yeah.
Okay.
Thank you for asking. Yeah.
So I just want to make sure everybody knows digitally, if you want to raise your hand, how to do it. But I think I saw you, Janet, raise your physical hand. Am I right? Would you like to speak?
Put it on, we can't hear you. You need to get off of the mute.
There we go.
Well, I just on the first two, Tony and Ron's thing, I seem to recall Don Stevens saying about companions. They're not necessarily your best friends. They're the people that show up. And sometimes those people may be there to rough off some of your edges. And I haven't seen Tony for 25 years, but the first time I saw Bao, I remember thinking, what a terrible guy. I mean, you were trying to make Bao do something that he didn't want to do. And I just thought, he's, it just surprised me when you were saying that people were making you vulnerable because, wow, everybody had the different point of view. It was a tape on the Ganges, and you were trying to get Bao to say it was dirty. And you just kept showing the tape and saying, what is that? What is that? You're trying to make Bao. It was in Chicago sometime in the 90s.
Yep.
The first time I got.
I've never been
Yeah.
to Chicago with someone else. And none of that's familiar.
Oh,
I don't-
somebody with the same name.
No,
Okay.
I don't think
yeah.
we've ever met. Yeah.
Yeah.
Mm.
Anyone else want to get vulnerable?
I came in late. What are you talking about?
We're talking about kind of trust and, and vulnerability, kind of one of the aspects is going out and taking chances and trying to figure out how to position your heart so that it's intimate and an expression of love, but not so far out that it winds up being hurt by others. Protecting the heart when necessary, but not to the extent that you keep it so withdrawn that you are regarded as kind of indifferent or impersonal or too reserved.
Okay. I'll have something
Anyone-
to say, but not at this moment. Okay.
Okay.
Thank you. Yeah.
Anyone else?
I'll jump in here.
Okay.
So we just had our LaSahabas, which was absolutely incredible. It felt like we got rocket propelled into the next spiritual level. It was just amazing. And the speaker, Valeria, was telling a story about her coming to Baba. And I've heard this from a lot of people, so I won't use her story, but that one of the things that switched them to realize that Baba was who he said he was when they really got vulnerable and really surrendered and handed things over to him. Because then things started to take a different track. Like the best of what we thought we could do got us to where we needed to surrender. So that's what I find a lot. I think I hold on, like I white knuckle it, I hold the steering wheel really, really strong. And it's not until I say, Baba, take the wheel, and I move over a bit, do things really, really change.
Beautiful. Yeah.
Can I read something?
Well, yeah, we've got two other people who have raised their
Oh,
hand.
okay. Let me raise my hand. I forgot. I'm sorry.
Okay.
Okay. Raise hand. I got it. Okay.
Anthony.
I forgot how to unmute there. Sorry. This is really the kind of intricate, delicate topic here. It's something that, I don't know, I'm always trying to feel how to word some of these things. It's really it can be a challenge. But I mean, I've had an experience a couple of times of I really resonated with what Tony was saying, that when you see yourself shut down a part of yourself and you feel what that feels like, how it's kind of not acceptable to for you to do that on that level. I think it's one thing to just be a little cautious, not revealing a certain part of yourself, and just kind of being a little reserved around people that probably aren't going to take well to what you have to say, or they have shown signs of that. But I've just had these situations where there's certain people I feel like I kind of want to get away from because of that, but you can't. I mean, they're positioned in such a way in your life to where because of your spiritual center you go to or your work, it's like Baba has you constantly around them all the time. And then it starts becoming a question of, okay, how am I going to be around this person? And I mean, for me, the best answer I have to it right now is just to kind of have this pleasant quietness where I smile and I'm pleasant, to not give off like a bad energy toward them, but to where I don't really open up a lot because the experience has been so negative. And that quiet pleasantness, I've found it helps me to kind of weave in and out of spaces that feel very uncomfortable. Because I found that when I would have like a heaviness in my face, they would kind of know it and it would just make things worse. Yeah, but God, it's such a thing. I mean, I don't know. I feel like another thing with it is I see how Baba puts people in our path to kind of, rub us in that way that kind of wears our sanskaras down. And I appreciate that when I see that that's kind of going on. But I'll tell you, when you get some of these situations that these people, you don't even feel like they're wearing down your sanskaras. It just feels like the way they look at you is so inaccurate and so ugly that it like brings out the worst in you, and you start doubting yourself. You start doubting, your confidence is weakened by being around them, and that's really, really challenging when you have to be around that. Sometimes quite a bit. So I guess I'm trying to say I don't think I've mastered this one at all. It's an ongoing thing, but I think just being pleasant and trying to smile and not reveal too much has helped me to be able to coexist around it.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
it's a challenge.
It would be nice if other people can kind of continue with what you're saying. I know. I remember when I was young, Darwin. I was kind of brought up, just connect and relate with everybody, and doesn't always work out real well. But I remember Darwin saying, sometimes you have to keep a polite distance. And when he first said that, I thought, polite distance? I don't want to do that, you know. But you discover that has real value in this life. I mean, that polite distance has got me through a lot of unnecessary entanglements, and So, next.
Marcia, you haven't shared. Ron will get to you right after.
Okay, I was going to make a comment, but I've been reading this book, Mehera Baba Calling, and I opened it to page 56 this morning. And it says, do not fear suffering. You should look upon physical and mental suffering as gifts from God. They bring their own lessons of the futility of the passing and of the intrinsic worth of the eternal. Do not get disheartened and alarmed when adversity, calamity, and misfortune pour in upon you. Thank God, for he has thereby given you the opportunity of acquiring forbearance and fortitude. Those who have acquired the power of bearing with adversities can easily enter the spiritual path. Do not fear suffering or blame anyone for it. According to the law that governs the universe, all suffering is your labor of love to unveil your real self. In comparison to the infinite bliss you experience on attaining the I am God state, all the suffering and agonies you go through amount to practically nothing. Be pure in heart. For the purification of your heart, leave your thoughts alone, but maintain a constant vigil over your actions. When you have thoughts of anger, lust, or greed, do not worry about them and do not try to check them. Let all such thoughts come and go without putting them into action. Try to think counter thoughts in order to discern, discriminate, and to learn, and above all, to undo the actions which are prompted by your own impressions. If people act dishonestly with you and create difficulties for you and deceive you, and yet you remain honest and pure, you are very fortunate, because these deceivers, or your so-called enemies, are your friends. They wash away your sins and weaknesses and make your path clear towards God. Jai Baba. I
Yeah,
think that's
thank you.
perfect, isn't
Beautiful.
it? Hey, Baba.
Yeah,
He tells you everything in this. I'm telling you, this book, it's like,
yeah.
I have 20 earmarked pages in here. So if you want me to read something else later, let me know.
Yeah, good, excellent.
Okay, Ron.
Okay, we've been talking about our potential for making efforts in this regard, but we don't want to forget about the other thing which we have available to us through which is Baba's grace. And so here's something that somebody wrote about what grace can do. And it says, two people of different faiths have been at odds with each other for years. Though they know their religious beliefs call for them to love each other, one day they get into a bitter conflict. And despite all their efforts to find harmony, their inherent differences once again get in the way. They persist, trying desperately to reach some common ground. But given their level of stubbornness and immaturity, no reconciliation would ever happen, even in 1,000 years. But this time the beloved, though fully aware of the futility of their efforts, is touched by their sincerity. He raises his hands in blessing, and thus the impossible is made possible, and they meet in sunlight. This is what divine grace does. It lays aside the rigid law of cause and effect, ushering in a warm spring day into the dead of winter.
Thank you.
Beautiful.
Jennifer?
Who was that? Was that yours?
Me?
No, I was wondering who wrote that.
You did.
I did? Oh my God. It
Pretty
sounded
good,
vaguely
huh?
familiar.
Pretty good.
Oh my God.
Elon.
Wow.
That's pretty funny. So,
Hey,
Jennifer,
Hey, everybody. Well written, Jeff. Well written. So this is such a good conversation. So much going on, vulnerability, having, it's hard sometimes you want to be vulnerable. You want to leave yourself open, because if you leave yourself open for vulnerability and be vulnerable, I feel like, to me, I'm leaving my heart open, but that's not always easy. So I have a couple things going on right now, and I try to know that Baba's putting us through our paces with all these different things that we're doing. I have a project I'm working on where I have to be on social media a lot. And so that means like Instagram Live, talking to people to do the thing I'm doing. And I just, so that takes a lot of vulnerability. I don't worry anymore about, but after doing things, it's like practice, right? After doing this for a while, you start to not really worry about what other people are thinking about you, and just trying to give value with the information you're sharing and the connections. And I feel like Baba is putting me in touch with more and more people and connecting in their lives. And so, by being vulnerable, and he's there right with me. I always have a little picture of him right on the other side of the phone camera, so I see him as I'm working, and I feel like I say what he wants me to say. It's not about Baba, it's about dogs, but it doesn't matter. And then the other thing that you all were talking about is about being, you know, continuing to be loving in difficult situations. And that is a sense of vulnerability. Baba has stuck me next to a very difficult neighbor. And there's always this conflict. My home is one that there's 3 houses in a row, and they were all built by the same family. And I live in the middle house. You know, the auntie passed away and resold, and here I live. And they still act like it belongs to them, which is really interesting. But, you know, running hoses through the backyard and different things that happen. And I just now have finally gotten a humor about it that, you know, it's like, Baba, what are you having me have to deal with again with people and trying to be loving? And so there's that staying open, being a good neighbor. I think a lot about what we've talked about before when Erich would say that, you know, we don't have a right to not love the rest of humanity. So I keep my heart open, and I try to have a little humor of like, what on earth could happen next? And then it does. And, you know, each time I kind of see Baba's little glint in his eye, like, this is why I had you move here, so you could practice these things. And I try not to take it personally. I think that's a helpful thing too. When these different things happen with us, and that we don't take it personally. And I do share sometimes things about Baba selectively, even though there's like pictures everywhere. I don't take them down when people come over. I don't necessarily explain them. I know some people feel maybe uncomfortable, but that's them, you know, and I think, well, Baba's probably working on them a little bit. So, but trying to stay true to being who I am. I don't feel the need to have anybody else join my club. I'd love them to, that would be nice. But the way I can do that is just by being a loving heart and letting Baba work through me. And I think he is next door. We'll see what happens. We're having another problem with the fence. So we'll see what happens. Jai Baba, thanks everybody.
Good. Wow, beautifully described. Yeah. Yeah, you know, it's the unfortunate metaphor that the Sufis have given about it's the sand in the oyster shell that produces the pearl. You know, so that's the drag. Yeah.
Anthony.
Yeah, something came to me a couple weeks ago. Somebody had posted a beautiful quote on one of the Baba Facebook pages, and I can't remember where I saved it or where it was from, but it was something along the lines of Baba had told somebody, had given them the advice, you know, from now on, when somebody yells at you, you are to realize that it is me yelling at you. You know, when you encounter this difficult person giving you a problem, it is me giving you the difficulty and the problem. And it was so beautiful. It really, the little visual I got from it was like in, you know, reading like some of Erich's stuff and some of the Mandali about the moods Baba would get in and the yelling and just the awkward moments. And I was like, wow, you know, we don't have Baba physically in our presence right now to do that to us. So it comes in the form of these people we're running into during the day that are doing the same types of things that, you know, Erich and the Mandali would explain in their stories of having to deal with his, you know, moods or seeming anger. So that's been helping me a lot. I don't think it totally answers the question of the delicate way of how to position your heart with people, but at least when you do get into a little mess and it's uncomfortable, it's really neat that it can kind of say, oh wow, you know, that was Baba doing that. You know, I didn't get to have him here in person doing it to me the way he did to the Mandalis, so he came in the form of this person or that. So that's been helping a lot when it gets a little weird.
Yeah, good. No, even though I knew it wasn't right, and it wasn't true, but I used to think in my earlier times with Baba that the loving things that were done to me were done by Baba, and the unloving things done to me were done by others. And it's very hard to bring those two, you know. Ramana Maharshi, the sixth plane saint, was once asked, what should our relationship be to others? And he was a real holy man. He kind of very, very meditative and thoughtfully said, there are no others. It's hard to imagine that. I had a hard time imagining that Baba would treat me the way these people were treating me. My sweet beloved doing this, you know, but that unifies everything, but that's hard to, that's a heck of a lot easier theoretically than knowing it experientially.
So Jeff, I'm going to take the mic.
Yeah, good. So we got
some-
Valeria here, and yeah, go for it.
So I would like everybody to meet Valeria Violette from Assisi and now staying at Payam's house. Thank you for bringing her. Hi. Hi, Valeria.
Hi.
Hi. So she hopefully isn't spoken out. She's had 3 sessions at the LaSahaba telling her Assisi story and her coming to Baba story and her experience. I think she's been to India over a dozen times and has been the official, unofficial Baba representative at Assisi. If we went there last year in October, and Payam came a week later, and we had the honor of Valeria taking us to Baba's cave. So Valeria, the stage, the mic is yours. We have about 20 minutes, maybe something like that, and
Yeah. Valeria, how about telling us
What to
how
say?
you heard of Baba?
They want to know how you heard about Meher Baba. How I heard about Meher Baba.
A little bit of your background, and then how it kind of, you got maneuvered into Baba's highway.
I mean, a little bit of background. I'm 85 years old. I could give you hundreds of years of background.
Yeah.
Well, okay, I shall try to compact it, make it short. I was a bourgeois girl, born and raised and grew up in Rome, studied in a nun school for years, absorbed all the Catholic guilt and sin and goodness, of course, and love for Jesus. I love Jesus since I was very small, and really did. And then after being with the nuns for so many years, all of a sudden, at 17, I went into a public school in upstate New York for a year, staying with an American family. So as I have been telling my friends recently during the Sahabas, I'm very fortunate to have had in my life 3 mothers. The first one being my mother, Italy and the Italian language, first mother. Then second mother, America, the US, in fact, with a different language and a different way of being that opened my mind to different ways. I will tell you about the third eventually, but you can guess which one, I think.
Mm-hmm.
So I was in America for a year. I came back and couldn't quite fit in again but I did. I sort of forced myself because I didn't have in myself the strength to transform my life, to move out. I was too young, I was inexperienced, I didn't do it. And I married a good man whom I knew, and we started a life together. We lived together for almost 15 years, and we had 3 sons. One born in Rome, one born in England, one born in Milan. When we came back to Rome after years of moving around, once again, I couldn't fit in. But at that stage, so I'm making it a bit long, but you want the background.
No,
and
this is
the
beautiful.
background, I'm sorry. In the
Beautiful.
meantime, we're having a really privileged, good life. Horses, sailboats, farmhouse, house in the country, everything, everything, everything. And a good family all around. I mean, my parents, his parents. Came back to Rome, and I began to see that I would have had to be absorbed by the life in which I couldn't fit in, that didn't resemble what I wanted. I wanted something different, something else. I wanted transcendence. I wanted love for God. I wanted to share that. I wanted companionship. I wanted love. So I asked for separation. Separation happened, friendly. Then it became less friendly. And that's when I broke away completely. And I became an outcast. And I went to live in a valley, in an Etruscan valley, isolated with horses, with another man eventually. And then things kept becoming worse and worse because I was very sad. I was desperate at what had happened. I had broken away. I had done a lot of damage. And at the time when I was really desperate, and this is to answer your question, a voice came to me insistently in English, wouldn't leave me alone. It said, go to India, be lost to yourself. I had no energy to go anywhere, no wish to try anything new. And I had no idea what India was. I knew the name, but I knew nothing else about India. The second order was clearer to me because being a loving Jesus, I knew what losing oneself meant. And at that time, the only friends I would see were an English woman who had married a Tuscan count of an ancient family, sort of an aristocrat. They lived not too far from where I was. So I would drive and spend a few hours one night with them over and over again. The count, who was older than my friend, died. And after some time passed, in the meantime, I kept hearing the message, wondering, why in English? What is that? Where does it come from? Why me? What is it? What am I to do? After some time, my friend told me that she was about to go to India with her father, a well-known journalist who had been knighted by the Queen, who had invited her to go. Sorry. Sorry.
It's okay. It's just background noise.
Someone is not muted, right?
To go with him and his wife and two others on the gentleman's last pilgrimage to India to the place of his guru. So my friend, the English woman, said to me she was going because her father was asking, although this guru had a bad reputation in her family. I begged her to write to her father, asking if I could join. And after my begging, eventually she did write to him. She was not convinced, but she did write, and eventually the reply came. And her father's name may be known to some of you. Her father was Tom Hopkinson, and his wife, Dorothy Hopkinson. So they said, okay, we accept your friend. And I flew to London. I met Dorothy and Tom. And the next day we flew to Bombay. And on the plane, on the way between London and Bombay, Tom sat next to me. And he began to tell me names, Meher Baba, Merazad, Mehrabad. I knew nothing about it. And that's how I came to India, and that's how India eventually, later on, became my third mother, connecting Italy, America, including.
Beautiful. So
Baba.
you stumbled upon two people who had met Baba. You know, both Tom and Dorothy had met
Yes.
Baba.
Oh,
Yeah.
yes. Tom and Dorothy had met Baba in London. I can't remember the year exactly. It must have been 1933, perhaps. Yes, because Dorothy had had many dreams of a Persian prince, she said. And eventually she saw a photograph of Baba. She knew Baba, this person was coming to London. She saw the photograph and she recognized the Persian prince as being Meher Baba. So she met Baba and she convinced Tom, who was not too eager to go, to come along, to go with her. Tom was the son of a pastor, you say that?
Yes,
Anglican pastor,
Yeah.
sort of severe. He was not into he didn't want God particularly. But he went because of Dorothy. And later he said that all he wanted to say, but his education would not permit him to say that, wanted to say to this Meher Baba who was in front of him was, I love you. But of course he couldn't, he didn't. So Baba asked him, do you like me? And Tom said, yes, I like you. This is what I remember.
Yeah, beautiful. When you got to Mehrabad and Merazad, any experiences there that stood out for you? I mean, you're arriving at this place with no background of who Baba is, really, except I guess whatever Tom told you on the airplane. Can you share a little bit of you met the Mandali and you went to the tomb and all of that? Anything that something must have happened there.
What year was that? What year was
Big
that?
time.
The year was 1982. It was February, Baba's birthday. And I was able to see and meet Padre. So I have a clear, sharp memory of Padre. His voice is beautiful, appearance. And I was struck by the physical and not only physical appearance of all these people I knew nothing about. But because I love to take photographs in those days, I still have photos I'd taken in 1982 of Padre talking to Tom Hopkinson, of Mehera talking to Dorothy Hopkinson, of Amrit, young Amrit, beautiful, her mother, Erich, Mani. I photographed them all. I have a beautiful series of photos, but I admired them. I didn't know who they were. I was told. But the one thing that happened to me then during those first 2 weeks is that I resisted the way a mule or a donkey would do, just didn't want to go into this tomb. I didn't know my heart was completely closed because I was coming from years of family conflicts at many different levels, practical, financial, and emotional. And as I've said before, I had become an outcast because I'd broken the law. In a patriarchal world, a young woman doesn't do that, and especially not in those days. It was the early 70s when that happened, and it wasn't done. So I had to rely on lawyers. It was not easy. It was very painful, in fact. So during those weeks, on the first day there in Mehrabad, Dorothy said, "Now, Valeria, you're here. That is Meher Baba's tomb. You go into the tomb and bow down and do what the others do." So I was struck by I was reluctant completely by two things she said. Do as the others do. And I had my ego, my pride, I should do what the others, copy them. But the main thing was bow down. You bow down, in respect or dedication or devotion to somebody you feel that reverence for. And I didn't feel any reverence. I didn't know. So, but because I had begged them, Tom and Dorothy, to take me there, to have me with them, I couldn't say no. So Baba placed me exactly in a spot where I had to do, yes, and I had to bow down. But every time I would go, bow down and say to the slab of marble, "I don't know who you are. I am a hypocrite. I'm doing this because I'm forced to. I don't know who you are." So I would step out and I would be surrounded by all this love and smiles and welcoming and warmth. And I couldn't take it. My heart was just like a fist. I couldn't. I was sad. And Mani would call me, hold these flowers, and Mehera would be, I couldn't. 2 weeks went by, and it was time to leave. And I entered the tomb, perhaps a little more freely, bow down, and I literally heard myself say, "Help." Next day, I was on a plane to go back to Italy. And I started blaming myself fiercely. What have you done? You have betrayed Jesus. Who is this being you have bowed down, they say, who is in the tomb? So the battle went on. I reached Rome and I had to pick up the threads. I had to start dealing with solving the problems I'd been trying to solve for years. An idea came to mind, so crazy, so completely whimsical. I followed the idea, the intuition, and things started changing. And they began to change, and something had happened while I was away that was changing the situation. And very soon I had to accept and admit that something was happening that was almost miraculous in my life. And little by little, gradually, Baba freed me. It took some more years, a few more years, but he was guiding me, and I felt I was supported, and that's how I realized that there was someone who cared for me. Someone I had never seen, someone I hadn't even searched for. But then over the years, I realized that Jesus, Baba, it took me a while. I'm proud and hard, but it happened. Jai Baba.
Beautiful, so touching. Yeah, I mean, you very touching story.
I'd like to say that that's a fantastic description of what awakening to Baba is. And you expressed it so clearly. Is really well done. Thank you.
Yeah,
Thank you, Baba.
I agree. Isn't it? And everybody had such beautiful, I mean, so many people have stories like yours, so tailor-made, so original to ourself, and where we're at. Baba, there's a beautiful song that has a refrain, God knows your native tongue. And Baba knows just our own vocabulary, our own language.
Valeria, I
Yes.
was wondering if you could maybe talk. Some of us have been in your company in Assisi, and now there's a lot more Westerners who have come who are taking the torch. But if somebody wanted to come to the cave, come to Assisi, what would you recommend? And hello, Nazreen.
Go ahead, go ahead. I'm not sure I understand the question. What would I recommend in what sense?
Yeah, just, advice if somebody wants to come to Assisi and take the pilgrimage of, where Baba walked.
In a practical way?
Yes.
Well, there are several people who would be glad to receive the request now in Assisi, I think. One is Emily Meyer, who lives in Assisi. At least she says, at least for a year, she has settled down in Assisi. She's found a place. Another one who wants to settle down in Assisi is called David Raffo. He has organized LaSahabas just recently, maybe a month ago. Another person who comes from the US to Assisi has already come at least 3 times to stay months and wants to come again this fall. Her name is Jennifer Tinsman. I believe she comes from Myrtle Beach.
Yeah, yes.
I can still be, if people want to connect with me because I'm the old, they know my name, they know my email, then I can, how can I say, address them to, and I can help them somehow if I'm available, if I'm strong enough. But now I'm beginning to, what do you say, retire? If Baba allows, I mean, if Baba wants me, I was already ready to retire. And then Payam invited me to come to Los Angeles, which is an incredible validation of my life in Assisi, and I've come. But I don't know if I've answered the question. I don't know. I really don't know if I've answered enough.
You totally have.
Yep.
Sorry.
Yes, you have.
Okay, good. So I'm still there until Baba wants me to do things, until my legs are strong enough to go down the ravine. I'm happy to go to the cave. But recently I was in Assisi when a rather peremptory message arrived from Switzerland, I believe. We are a group from Hyderabad. We're coming. Will you please, I said, Emily, it's your time to meet Hyderabad people. Then we said we would go together. Then something happened the day, and she went. She was happy. She was happy to go to meet these Indian people who had gone through the whole of Europe, a huge journey, all the Baba places up to England, everywhere. I had already taken a group of Hyderabad a couple of years before, so I was glad to say, you do it, like a way of pushing her to start. So we'll see. I'll do my best.
Yeah. You've been very gracious over the years. Being
Baba
there.
gave me a life, gave me a
Yeah.
family, because I've lived alone for over 30 years. So living alone in a place like Assisi can be beautiful and can be really hard, because it's a very Catholic place. And when you carry Baba, you can't talk about, you cannot share the avatar. It's not easy. So I would always need to jump out sometimes, go to India, come to America where two of my sons live, just leave Assisi for a while to breathe and then go back. So it's both wonderful and it has its difficulty. So it was a gift from Baba to receive the Baba lovers, always. There was always an effort and inevitably also a reward. And the reward came from the heart. The effort was just, giving your time, your energy, your driving. But the reward was much higher. You know that.
Yes.
Yeah. So beautifully expressed.
Why did you choose Assisi?
Why did I choose Assisi? I did not. Part of the story, it has two different tracks. I was living alone in a house that had been given to me as a gift by my father, by my father. In a place in Umbria, the same region where Assisi is, the house, the palazzo is about 45 minutes south of Assisi. I'd always known St. Francis and Clare. I'd always loved them. But in my mind, I would say to Francis, I'm too busy with my life now. I will come one day. I always wanted to go to Assisi, but I was busy. So I was living in this house alone, an outcast. My brothers wouldn't speak to me, but this was my home. One day, after 5 winters alone in the silence in this big place, a phone rang, and it was one of my brothers with a serious voice. He said, Valeria, you're like a sitting duck there. You better move away from the house. There are rumors that one of the family will be kidnapped. The moment I heard that, I knew I had to leave the house. I couldn't sleep at night. I would open every door. I was alone in a place. People in the village would know the lights. I felt afraid. I had been invited to Assisi by a cousin of mine, and she had a tiny little place. I spent there 2 nights. This is before the phone call. And loved it. I loved the silence. I loved the feeling. The place where she had this little place was a Franciscan, a place where Francis had gone, where Giotto had painted. So when the phone call came, I thought of that. I said, I'm going to go to that little place where even if I sneeze, the neighbors will know that I'm there. I felt safe. A tiny place, like a hamlet. And I'm still living there. I have a small stone house. We are about 22 inhabitants. There's no shop, nothing. Old walls, a bell tower, a bell. But that is one part, my choice. Although everything, of course, was organized by Baba. So I bought the little house outside Assisi in 1984. What happened in 1986 when I was in Merazad, and I was telling Erich that 1 month later, there would be a huge gathering in Assisi for the very first time in history, when the leaders of the great religions of the world would come together, invited by the Duke of Edinburgh. Immediately, as I finished my sentence, he said, "You go there and be Baba's silent representative." And I went. And that changed my life. And I decided that Assisi was the place where I'd been sent. I had a reason for being, and I stayed on. And that was 86.
Thank you. That's a wonderful answer. It's Gabriella.
Yeah.
Hey, Baba.
Wow. Well, I guess I hate to, we're kind of getting kind of late here on the East Coast. It's about 11:30. Valeria, that was so touching, all that you shared. And it's so vivid too, so vivid. And Johannes, I don't know if you see Johannes and Sabine, they were just there in Assisi.
Oh,
I
yes,
don't know.
of course,
I don't-
Chuck. Buonasera.
Hello.
Hey, it's
hi.
wonderful to see you,
Yeah,
Good to
Valeria.
see you
you.
again.
Oh, so you'd actually met each other. Oh, good.
Yeah, we did.
Yes,
We did.
Valeria picked us up from the train and took us up to the caves, and then Emily took us down. We had a wonderful time. We felt so at home.
I was going somewhere else. I can't remember, but
Yeah, your sons were coming over.
I came to the train.
Yeah,
Yes.
yeah, you did.
How are you, by the way? Well,
We well now. We came back from Assisi and sort of went down with a cold and were out for a couple of weeks. But I think it's Baba's cleansing, sort of settling it all down, moving things. And yeah, we're wonderful now. Thank you.
Yeah. Well, let's have a final reading. Has someone have a reading to? Let's
Yeah,
see.
let me read. Let me
Okay.
read this quote.
Then we'll have a few moments of silence.
This is, I believe, from Discourses. When it is clearly understood that spiritual wisdom is latent in all, you will no longer be anxious to provide others with ready-made answers and solutions. I'll read that again. When it is clearly understood that spiritual wisdom is latent in all, you will no longer be anxious to provide others with ready-made answers and solutions. Jai Baba.
Beautiful.
Jai
Maybe,
Baba.
I don't know if, Gabriella, if you have a poem that's right handy or not. Whoop, I guess not. Let's have a few moments of silence then. Well, thank all of you for sharing, and Valeria especially. This was great from beginning to end.
thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you, Jeff. Thank you, Valeria, and everyone.
That she's Dinku is there in Mumbai, so we got a few people from distant lands.
We have Arizona in the house.
Yeah. See that?
Arizona.
The Margie.
Johannes and Sabine, hi.
Oh, Margie's there somewhere. I don't
Right here with us. Look at our square.
It's dark.
It's dark. Yeah, I don't know.
It's
what-
dark.
Wait.
Opa.
Oh, Baba.
I'm here.
There she is. Hey,
So under one roof for 2 nights, we had 85-year-old, 70-year-old, 67-year-old, and a 25-year-old, all Baba lovers.
At your place, at your house?
At our house. That
Yeah.
was, we were having a Baba slumber party love fest.
I have been happy in their house.
Yeah.
We
it's
got
like
a whole case of mangoes waiting for you now. Valeria.
Yes, I like to chew on a mango.
Generation XYZ.
Yeah, there we go.
Wow, this is a lot of people on Jeff's chat. I hope to see all of you on Thursday nights.
Margie, I saw your mom's post. She was regretting she couldn't be there with you and your grandmother.
Yeah. Donnie then. Vanessa was bummed she couldn't make it out.
Well,
Good night.
thank you, Valeria. Thank you.
Baba.
Thank
From
you
me.
all. and
Everyone. Thank you.
Thank you,
Baba.
guys.
Have a wonderful
It's
weekend.
my very first, my debutto.
Yes.
Debut. Yes. Debutto. Jai Baba.
How beautiful to hear your story, Valeria. Jai Baba.
Thank you very much.
Jai Baba.
Jai Baba.
Hey, Baba.
Thank you.
Thank
All of you. Ciao, ciao, ciao.
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 Valeria.
Ciao.
Ciao.
It's easy now. We'll see you there.